this. I want to thank everyone for coming. There's a lot of people here. So this is the third talk on this subject about Gathas and family. How can the Gathas help us in family? The first one was kind of a general introduction with the big picture ideas. The second one that we had, I think it was in October, was about our relationship with our spouse and marriage. And then this third one, I'm going to be focusing on children, about the parental relationship with children and what the Gathas say about that and how we can use it to help us in our relationship with our children. We're coming off of a lot of global events, and that's something I think that's been on a lot of our minds. And especially with what's happening in Iran, I know a lot of people were at demonstrations yesterday, and I talk to family and friends, and one of the challenges I think that we're facing right now, not just in these past couple of months, but in the past years, is a lot happening in the world, a lot of druge happening in the world, a lot of negativity, a lot of violence. And I think a huge challenge is, how do we shield our children from all of that, right? As I was talking to a friend, and he was very upset because he let his emotions about Iran, about what's happening in Iran, come into his household and negatively impact the atmosphere of his household, right? And I think, we're all human. We can probably all relate to that, right? So when my friend told me that, I thought maybe this would be a good opportunity to think about that in terms of this talk here. So focusing on how we can protect our family and our children from the violence and druge that's happening in the world, so that we can facilitate them into their path of righteousness and into the world to make the world a better place. Just want to make sure I'm plugged in here. Sorry, one moment. Okay. So, all that being said, if you guys don't mind, I would like to take just a brief moment of silence for our brothers and sisters and compatriots in Iran who have passed, and who have gone back into the spiritual realm of Manag. So if you could just take a moment of silence with me to kind of acknowledge them and welcome their light and energy into our space. Okay. So I'm going to start with Gatha 9 from the Ushtavaiti Gatha. It talks specifically about children. It says, "This I ask you, tell me precisely, Lord, who fashioned precious serenity with dominion? Who made the child lovingly attentive to the parent? It is by these questions, wise one, that I am able to recognize you as the creator of all by your progressive mind." So I think that this verse is doing two things. One, it's acknowledging this beautiful connection and this beautiful opportunity we have between a parent and their child. Who made the child lovingly attentive to the parent? This is a natural thing that occurs with every child. Every child is born with this loving attention for their parents. And so he's recognizing that, and he's also using this as proof of Ahura Mazda's existence and as proof that Ahura Mazda is the creator. And he does this in other verses by asking who created the waxing and waning of the moon, who created day and night, who created sleep and being awake, these patterns that we see in the universe represent the kind of script or code that was created by Ahura Mazda, and this connection between parent and child is evidence of that. And so by asking that question, it brings us to the enlightenment of, well, who else could it be but a divine, progressive, benevolent creator to give us to give us this beautiful gift of the loving, attentive child, right? So this is a gift that we're given, and then I think a stanza that relates directly to this. We're jumping back now to the Ahuna Viti Gatha in Song 6. Zoroaster talks about how we have a duty to our family and to our children to protect that divine connection, right, that Ahura Mazda has given us. So he says, "Wise one, I am the one who venerates away in consideration an evil mind from you, perverse mind from the family, related wrong from the community, revile from the fellowship, and extremely evil counseling from the world's settlements." So Zoroaster is telling us that we have a duty to shield our family from perverse mind, right? So there's a lot of perverse mind happening in the world, and at this phase in our children's life, they are not familiar with Druj. Their spirits are also coming from Manog, from the framework of Asha, and it's our job to protect and facilitate that as best as they can before they interact and encounter Druj, so that they can build these facilities and tools to maintain righteousness in this important phase of their lives. And we as parents are basically this transition, right, from the past into the future. So we have a kind of this responsibility to shield the light of the future from the darkness of the past. I saw a quote yesterday that really resonated with me. Like, with everything that we're seeing happening in the world, it sometimes can feel like the world is ending, right? But it's not that the world is ending, it's that a world is ending and a new one is beginning. And it might be hard for us to see this because we're in the middle of all this darkness. We are confronting Zahak directly, and so it might be hard to understand that the future can be and will be brighter because of the progressive nature of the universe. So that's one of our duties right now in this transitory period in the world, to help the next generation transition into light from darkness. So really being a parent in this time in the history of the world is an incredible duty in a way. So we really have an opportunity to embrace that. And so how do we shield our children from Druj and create a path of Asha for them? Well, for me, a major part of that is processing our grief, anger, and sadness in a healthy manner, on our own, right, away from our children, so that they don't have to experience that yet, because they're building those tools right now to deal with it in the future. So we can't disrupt that learning experience. So for me, a lot of that is cognitive behavioral therapy comes into play for me. So a major way to help yourself divert that grief away from your child is to process it internally on your own. So when those emotions come into your body, that grief, that sadness, that anger, what helps me is I identify what those emotions are within me instead of reacting to them first, right? So I identify the grief coming into my body. I analyze it. I look at its shape and color in my body, right? it's like for me, that grief feels kind of like a dark blanket, right? That's weighing me down, and I can feel it across my body. I can feel it in my shoulders and my chest and my stomach, and I can feel the texture. It's like this dark blanket, and by identifying it, I'm able to better process it because I understand what it is. It's not my soul, it's an emotion, and I can protect my soul from it by understanding what it is and letting it pass through me. And then also, what I do is exercise to make sure my body stays stimulated and healthy. Because if we don't exercise, then we start to retrogress. Our body starts to decay almost. It goes into atrophy. But if our muscles are stimulated, it helps stimulate our mind, and it helps us stay strong. And then another thing, going back to our last talk, is if you have a partner, use it to your advantage. Talk to them, counsel them about your grief, about your sadness, and they can help you process it by talking about it and letting it out and identifying it in words, putting it into a tangible manifestation so that you can identify it and let it process through you. And of course, therapy is another way to do it. But the idea is to take all of that in that we're absorbing, process it internally, and let it flow back out away from our children so that they can maintain this kind of peaceful realm within our household. And we're jumping around a bit, but I think these all kind of tie to each other. So in Song 11, Zoroaster says, "To what land should I turn? Where should I turn to go? They hold me back from my folks and my friends. Neither the community pleases me, nor do the wrongful instructors of the land. How can I please you, O wise God?" So something that we learn about Zoroaster from his songs in the Gathas is that he grew up in he grew up in a kind of dark world. He was surrounded by people who were consumed by Druj, who were professing the wrong thoughts and showing the wrong deeds. And he made this very clear. Like the community that he grew up in was not a benevolent community. And he says, the wrongful in the community, neither the community pleases me, nor do the wrongful instructors of the land. So we know that Zoroaster likely grew up in the north, towards the steppes of Central Asia, on a river. I believe it was the Amu Darya, unless I'm mistaken, and it's the Sir Darya, but I think it's the Amu Darya. And it's like, metaphorically speaking, it's can be dark up there, right? It's overcast a lot, and then he makes the decision to leave that community for his own self-preservation. And this is going back to that idea of self-preservation, right? Of taking care of yourself so that you can be benevolent to your community and your family. And he decided that he needed to leave this dark community and forge his own path to create a brighter world for himself and for his family and community. So he makes the bold decision to leave, which is hard, right? I think a lot of us can relate to that, right? So, a lot of Iranians have had to leave Iran for the same exact reason. We know the Parsis did it. Myself, I had a challenging upbringing in the Midwest, and I decided that I had to forge my own path and find my own path, and I moved to Los Angeles, to this brighter land. And Zoroaster even says that there's a stanza where he says the sun basking in the sun-bathed dominion, right? He went south into southern Iran or Afghanistan. We're not exactly sure where, but that's where he journeyed out on his own and eventually found King Vishtaspa and established his community there. And that's where the Zoroastrian community began and prospered for thousands of years from there. Um, and, you know, a lot of us, most of us, I would say, are, you know, we're not billionaires, right? We're not leaders of the world. We're not in the elite. And so we have to work with what we have to maintain that world for our children. And that's another way that we can help process this grief and negative emotions is through our work and through creation. So putting that energy into creating as opposed to into a destructive force. So for me, it's focusing on my architecture office and focusing on creating beautiful buildings, which then in turn help bring resources into my family to provide this safe and comfortable realm for my daughter and my family. Zoroaster says in Song 11 as well, I know, wise one, that I am powerless. I have a few cattle and also a few men. I appeal to you. Please, Lord, see to it. Lend me the help a friend gives a friend by teaching the riches of good mind through righteousness. So this shows, if we look at the legacy of Zoroaster, he lived about 3,500 years ago, right? And we're still talking about him today. And he's still helping us in our community in this modern world. But he came from humble means. He had a few cattle, right? He was not an elite. He was not a wealthy man. But he used his means to propagate righteousness throughout the world. And and the effect of that was a multi-thousand-year-long legacy that led to the Achaemenid Empire, the Parthian Empire, and the Sasanian Empire that flourished. It created some of the most beautiful works of architecture that the world has seen. It established it was the first civilization to establish human rights for an international society through King Cyrus, and it fostered equality between men and women. We saw women taking up major leadership roles in the Zoroastrian era of Iran, and that's what I believe led to the success of the empire. Not only through military commanders and businesswomen who were very well respected in these empires, but queens themselves ruled the empire. Ifra Hormizd of the Sasanian Empire ruled as regent for 16 years while Shapur II was coming to age. So this humble man with humble beginnings, who had to leave his community with barely anything except for what he could carry with him, created this 3,500 year long legacy of righteous thought and righteous action and righteous creation that we're still benefiting from today. And so, you know, myself, I also have humble means, right? I started a business with my own personal savings and was able to grow from there. I'm not given millions of dollars or anything to do what I'm doing, but I take what I have and use it to bring righteousness to my family and to our community as much as I can. And this just shows that anyone can do that, and we have the power to do that. And although there's all of this evil happening in the world, we can have this friendship with Ahura Mazda to help counteract this. And in the same song 11, he says, "Who will, O wise one?" This is the Kemna Mazda. "Give me protection when the wrongful threatens to harm me, other than your fire and mind. It is through the working of these two that, O God, righteousness thrives. Do enlighten my inner self with this doctrine." And this kind of goes back to how we create this shield of righteousness for our children, it can all happen within our mind, right? That's what this is saying. And through our connection with Ahura Mazda, we have the power and the fire to succeed at at creating these realms in this world of righteousness. And eventually, Zoroaster, in his final song, in Song 17, he is, as we talked about last time, he's officiating the wedding between his daughter and her partner. And you can see that he's kind of achieved his goal of creating this positive, progressive, benevolent world. He gets to marry off his daughter and give them advice on righteousness and how they should win each other through righteousness, and that creates the establishment of this trajectory that we're still living in today because of these actions. So I think that's the basic idea that I'm trying to communicate here, that our families, the connection that we have with our families, is a divine gift. And we, through the strength of our own minds, have the power to protect that divine gift from Druj and the evils of the world. And we can do that through prayer. These prayers help us remind us of that. But we also have to do it through taking care of ourselves and our health, right? And processing grief in a systematic way, and developing habits of processing the grief, the sadness, and the anger in a systematic way that continuously and effectively protects our family from Druj, so that we can bring our children into the next world and allow them to bring their light that they're bringing from the spiritual realm into the physical world. That's our responsibility right now as parents in this era. So I hope that made sense. I hope that came together. And I'd love to open it up to the group and get your feedback and learn from you guys about parenting and how you parent and how you deal with these types of things. So thank you. We have a comment from Ash Zarian. Let me read it. It says, oh,
I think we lost Kaveh. Let's give him a minute to join back in.
Artemis-san, do you want to pause the recording?
I apologize. I got disconnected there, guys. I cannot see
Hi.
I can't see the message from Ash anymore. Ash, would you like to read it, or would someone else like to read it? Oh, here we go. Now I can see it. It says, what Kaveh is describing is an extremely important and ancient practice called chod, i.e. locating, visualizing, and processing grief and anger. In Tibetan Nepali culture, Sultrim Alion wrote a fantastic book on it called Feeding Your Demons. Ash, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Thank you, Kaveh, for the wonderful presentation. So, I mean, we're living in some really dark times right now, and I think a lot of us are lacking, generally speaking, a lot of us are lacking the tools to be able to transmute Druj. So, I'm really big into metaphysics, so I always, read the Gathas or any spiritual principle on or through a metaphysical lens. And so I believe Druge is kind of a reflection of negativity, and negativity at its most fundamental exists at the level of thought. So in other words, Druge exists within us. And so uh, the question becomes, how do we transmute this negativity within us as it reflects on the outside? I'm a big proponent that our outer reality is a reflection of our inner reality, that the world on a quantum level is very much a mirror. And so uh, I decided roughly a little over 10 years ago to start meditating to transmute this negativity. And I never stopped. I ended up going to retreats. I probably put in well over thousands of hours of meditation to be able to transmute my negativity and to become closer to Asha and to display and exhibit and practice righteous thought, word, and deed. And one of the tools that I have been working with that for me seems to go beyond meditation is this practice of chode, of, of visualizing my grief and my anger as a personification of how you said earlier, Kaveh, like this dark blanket and locating it in your body and visualizing it. And by personifying it, we can actually speak to it and see why it exists in the first place and what it needs. And then in the practice of chode, we kind of dissolve our body into a kind of nectar, and we feed this negativity our positive light, so to speak. And by feeding it our positive light and by personifying it, we're able to transmute it into light, or in the context of Zoroastrianism, Druj into Asha. And that then gets reflected in the world as it gradually becomes more filled with light. I hope that made sense. Thank you.
That definitely makes sense, and yeah, it's very spot on with what I was talking about. Um, Thank you for explaining that. Artemis, I had to switch to my phone because something's wrong with my computer. So maybe you can help facilitate other comments because I'm not able to see everyone's faces here.
The only comment in the chat was from Ash. So if anyone has any other comments, please raise your electronic hand and you can unmute and go ahead and say your comment. Go ahead, Dina. Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank both Kaveh and Ash. You gave me a different perspective from which to look at this, which I found very valuable. In raising my kids, I came from a very authoritarian background in India. And it wasn't till I really reoriented my thinking from the Gathas that I realized how much more valuable that was than an authoritarian approach. Obviously, kids don't have the fully developed personalities and minds of adults and judgment, but within their limited range as they grow older, if we give them the ability to make choices and if we reason with them, I think it goes a lot further in the parent-child relationship. At least I found it much better if I said, no, you can't do that. Why? Because I said so, blank. But if I reasoned with them, it made a difference. So I just thought I'd offer that up, for those of you who are parents, because parenting is a challenge, that's for sure. But it's one of the most important things we can do with our lives. So,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Dina. I was actually just talking about that with a friend. Instead of commanding them, nurturing them is going to lead to much better results. Like giving a plant water, right? Giving it sunlight. Um, when when I'm and as you said, reasoning with your child as opposed to commanding them. I think that's a very good thought. Thank you.
Taranak, go ahead.
she needs to unmute.
Okay, thank you for the insightful talk. A long time ago, as I was raising my kids, very challenging, and reading parenting books and going to seminars and things. One person told me, and this stayed with me this whole time, that your kids do what you do, they don't do what you say.
Yeah.
Because we ideally pick or want to instill ideas in their head that as we were growing up, we didn't like, right? And we say things that is ideal for us, and then we do something completely opposite. So I think kirdar, or the action, the good deeds, really goes a long way when you're raising kids.
Yeah, great.
And another thing that I find to be very important that I received very good advice on this is something that's kind of like in contrast to how I was raised. One thing that I find to be very important is learning about your child as opposed to thinking that they're a replica of you, right? That your child is not going to be you. They are not you. That is so important, I think, to recognize. And there's actually like an excitement and beauty to learning about who your child is, who this unique individual in the world is. And the more time we take to learn about them, I think the better we can tailor our actions to their needs, right? Um, like I'm discovering that my daughter has a passion for ballet. Neither my wife or I are dancers at all. I can barely dance. But she has this incredible passion. She does it in her spare time. She talks about it in her spare time. She loves going to ballet class. And so I'm trying to learn like about ballet so that I can help her grow in it with that passion. And it's not just like their interests or their hobbies, but the way that they think is going to be unique. And we have to learn about that and understand how they think and react to things. So being observers, neutral observers, I'd say, is
Yeah.
is a major thing in raising our children, as opposed to expecting them to be a certain way. You know, I could have expected her to do soccer, which would have been ideal for me, right? And she does like soccer, but this is clearly her passion. So by listening, I think that's a major help for parenting.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I wish I could do it all over again.
Nilüfer,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kaveh, June, for always doing these talks. They're very insightful and like nourishing. And I think we all need these reminders. I was thinking a lot about all the elements of Duruj and development and the idea of this neutral observer. And I think in a lot of ways, like how you could translate so many of these ideas as a parent is like presence, the idea of just fully being present with your child as an act of love. And that presence is like letting go of your ideal of what you think they're supposed to be like, who they should be, how they should be. And then even your own judgment as a parent. I was talking to someone actually just recently, like, the best thing I can do sometimes is let go and just be a present vessel. Like be a curious vessel of where they want to take me on their journey of like being upset or sad or just quiet.
That's that's a really good point, and a really good way of saying it too. I think that helps make it clear what we can do. And I think the what Ash was talking about, the choke, I think he said uh, um, that processing that, finding the space on our own to process the negative emotions that we're dealing with, constantly dealing with the world, right? Allows us to then come to the table present when we have the opportunity to be with our kids. So I think it's really important to figure out a system where you can find those spaces to process things on your own. Like for me, a lot of that time is in the drive to work, right? So listening to music, just letting it come out in the privacy of my car. Then when I get home, I'm able to be more present because I've allowed those emotions to process through me, as opposed to trying to reject them and say, everything's okay, right? So thank you, Neela.
Ash, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, everyone. Sorry, I have someone who just came to the door. I'm gonna have to pass. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Here, I can maybe make a comment as well then. Thank you, Kaveh. This is awesome. Very, very enlightening as always. And I think I just thought about two things that you both were saying and then what Nilu was just saying, which is I think that yes, and I think Fahrenak as well, now that I think of it. So we need to kind of teach our children by doing like what we do. They actually observe more what they observe, which makes complete sense. And I think that includes our own, it's like this unique mix of us kind of shielding them, like you were saying, Kaveh, of like the things that are age appropriate and they're available to process and helping them. But at the same time, kind of showing them the little ways in which we struggle and we process and we take healthy behaviors to address it, right? So like that's how they will learn. It's like, hey, I'm struggling. So when I talk to the kids, they'll be like, I'm struggling with this. And I'll be like, oh, me too. They're like, really? Like it's hard for you? Hi, sweetie. So, and I'll be like, oh, I'm scared. I get scared too. They're like, really? Or like, I cry too. And they're like, really? Like, for them just to know that they understand that as well. And that we then can show them healthier or more productive, because we're all still learning habits and ways. And then we do them together. And I think to me that just resonated with what you were saying about the Gathas, because what could be more Zoroastrian than an iterative process of growth and learning as we live our experiences and then reflect upon them, right? And I think none of us have all the answers. And even as parents, we don't have all the answers for our children, but we are trying to help each other and learn together. So anyways, I was saying this is very poignant. It reflects strongly with me. Resonates.
Thank you, Naveen. I think I don't know if someone else was going to jump in, but I think that's also a really important point. For me, my daughter just recently turned 4, so we're just starting to get into that communication realm. So I think you're in a later phase where I need to start thinking about applying that as well as she gets older.
Well, and it's funny, you see the challenge. So like the one who just jumped in my lap is 4 as well. And because she's the third, she's already trying to do everything the 11 and the 8-year-old are doing. But she's the one who will talk to me. And it's amazing because she'll like meltdown, do a 4-year-old outburst like you're probably experiencing, right? And the minute I go, hey, honey, what are you feeling? Let's try to use our words. And then she'll all of a sudden start processing. And I'll go like, that's hard for me too. Like I think it's a mix of like empathy and protection coming together with like some teaching. And like it's not like any of us do it perfectly, but the balance of the three is probably something I'm working on always.
Absolutely. We when our daughter has those meltdowns, right? And I have started to apply that idea of processing emotions. Like when she is having the meltdown, I say, what are you feeling right now? And she said, I feel frustrated. And I say, okay, what does that feel like? And she's like, it feels like alligators in my belly or something like that, right? And just as soon as she says that, I can see the tension start to come down. And yeah, it's if we can do that early on, like that's something that I didn't learn until my like 20s, 30s, right?
No, especially, I mean, I'm happy for our children because I think especially for men growing up, at least for me in the 80s and 90s, that you didn't talk about your feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, I mean, the only feeling you could really talk about was anger, and even that was not really okay for us. So, no, I think to your point, like if she can name the feelings, it's so liberating. And then the second part, what I was saying too, is like, if you can then help with what are some tools that will help you with what do you do next? Because I think that's like the Zoroastrian part. It's like we all experience things, right? And like even Zarathushtra, as he talks about the two different ways of being, the two Manus, they both are. What matters is what do we do with the events and choices and results of things in our day-to-day lives. Yeah. So anyways, thank you so much. This is so wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in, Kaveh. I know you talked about emotional protection and intergenerational trauma. I think that's such an important topic. And I do see it in even children that were born here, that it seems like it has gone into the genes or something. But I know, growing up as a child, my parents did protect us emotionally and didn't mention a lot of things to us, just because they wanted, like you said, to protect us. But I think there's also a fine line because I kind of grew up and then I found out certain things have been kept from me. And that kind of created a sense of anger as well. So I think there's a fine line between, what age we have to protect children from these things and what age we have to discuss it with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to kind of bring that out as well.
And I'm really glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Artemis, because I do want to make sure to communicate that what I was talking about there is not necessarily shielding our kids from information or the facts of life. As my daughter gets older, she's going to see the news, her friends are going to talk. What I'm trying to shield them from is our negative reaction to those outside forces. So it's absolutely important to also talk to them about the things that are happening and the things that impact them as well. And like Naveed said, go through it with them in a healthy way. It's about facilitating the chaos. Like we're a funnel, we're a filter, right? And filtering out like all the negative impacts that could damage them and channeling it into a healthy relationship, healthy project, right?
Yeah, 100% agree. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think we have another comment. Protect and prepare, help them practice using their good minds. Yep. Do we have any other thoughts before we begin to wrap this up?
Nilu has one.
Okay. Hi again, mother of three, so I have to chime in on everything. So I think it's so important, like what Artemis said, is like there are children, let's say, born outside of, so I'm a first generation Iranian American, right? But I know I have so much trauma of my parents and their parents and all the things they've been through, right? With Iran and revolution and the chaos that brought. And kind of how Artemis describes, there are some things we were shielded from, and some things like we had to play a mystery game of growing older and putting together pieces of what information we didn't get and suddenly got. And I do love Kaveh. What I think you're talking about a lot is the act of being a mindful parent when you describe the filter. And again, it kind of goes back to being that vessel. Like sometimes the best thing to do really is nothing. Like if they're really upset, sit on the bed with them and let them ride that wave and just show them, hey, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm not going to bring up my childhood. I'm not going to bring up my whatever. I'm not going to bring up my assumptions of you. I'm not going to bring, well, because your dad is this is why you're like that, right? I need to be present with you. And that's the best way I can love you. And I think in a lot of ways, we let go of those suitcases that never got unpacked, right? And then our children can stand on our shoulders. And I think that's like the next level, right? Of what we can do. So thank you. I'm so grateful we're having this discussion.
Likewise, and like I said, I love to hear the feedback from you guys because I'm learning like the dynamics that you guys have put together, and I can apply it to my life as well. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Kaveh. Thank you, everybody.
Go ahead, Dina.
I would be interested in hearing people's reactions or people's points of view regarding how your children's peers are affected by the fact that they are Zoroastrian. Because we are a minority in a much larger community. And I'd be very interested in hearing other people's opinions on this issue. Thank you.
Well, I'll go with that, and then I know Ash has his hand up as well. So my kids' friends, Dina, are 90% even more, maybe non-Zoroastrian. I kind of we've been going to Avesta classes since they were in pre-K, but somehow their school friends have become their main friends. And
Exactly.
their friends know that they are Zoroastrians and sometimes ask them about it. And luckily, my kids are able to give them a general idea about Zarathushtra's teachings. And then usually it ends at there. They're mainly interested in the things that young people are interested in, and usually don't talk about, religion or beliefs per se. But I haven't noticed anything notable to that effect. They kind of
Yeah.
may be curious, they talk about it, explain a little bit, and then they go on about things
Other
that they
things.
go on.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. So I'll go to Ash, and then Naveed has his hand up. And if anyone, has a comment about Dina's question, we'll be happy to hear it.
Um, so one kind of, I guess they kind of call it a spiritual technology, but one spiritual technology I've been becoming familiar with is the concept of Kabbalah. So Kabbalah means to receive, and having read some of the history of Zoroastrianism, Kabbalist thought was influencing Zoroastrianism, and Zoroastrianism was influencing Kabbalah. And a huge theme in Kabbalah is about expanding the vessel. So the vessel being the human body. And, do children have the capacity? Do they have the vessel to handle Druj? And if they don't, what are the best ways we can do to protect them from Druj? And so for me, it's how do we help children develop their vessel such that they can handle Druge in the most effective way eventually? So, I mean, when do we know when they're ready? So, for example, the story of the Buddha comes to mind, where his father tried to shield him so much from Druge that he built this fortress around the Buddha such that, to keep him away from it. And then when he finally rebelled, and he snuck out of the fortress, and he was exposed to all of the horrors in the world. So, I mean, for me, it's what are the best ways we can help develop the vessel of the child such that they can handle Druge on their own, because we're not always going to be around, and such that when do you, when when can we develop the ability to know that they're ready to effectively handle Druge? So these are just a bit of my insights and questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nabi. Thank you, Ash. You have to
Sorry, I had
unmute.
to. No, sorry, I had to make sure that the children were not screaming in the back. So, um, yeah, and if anyone else has thoughts, feel free to chime in. Of course, I was gonna say, responding to Dina's comment, I took the opportunity to ask my almost 12-year-old, because he was right there, and I asked him quickly. I was like, "What do you think?" And he had interesting, just raw thoughts. He said, one, they don't really talk about religion a lot amongst his peers, at least in the Bay Area where we live. But he says they study it. And so what he notices is how they don't talk about Zoroastrianism, of course, but we talk about it at home a lot. But they're studying, Buddhism and Judaism and Hinduism and soon Christianity and Islam. And he just notices how different their points of view are. So when I actually do some of the Gathas and practice sessions or prep work, I actually have been running them by him in particular for years, because he's my eldest. And it is amazing how much they grok and the capacity they have for understanding that inherent wisdom within. And he really enjoys it, but he says they don't talk about that level of conversation at school. Like, right, like they basically tell them, Buddhism is about suffering or something like that. That's kind of like what his takeaway was, right? And Judaism is about these laws. But they don't end up talking about it. But he kind of likes being different, is how he expresses it. He doesn't like really bother him, and it says kind of being different is okay because it resonates with him, essentially, and the way we talk about things. That made me think about one other comment that everyone else was saying, was that I think for me, a lot of it is, again, about helping the kids have tools, but to, I think, obviously Neela's comment about, and Artemis's comment about intergenerational trauma, like, I think I had a very similar experience where, being a first generation Iranian American, I think a lot of our families went through a lot of trauma, and I never physically experienced it, but like my cells almost somehow have a response to it, right? And to this day, I mean, we were just at this, huge global day of action in Los Angeles. There was, I don't know, 350,000 people, and I can just feel very differently the trauma that comes through from this. And I had a pretty large, I don't know, quarter life crisis of sorts that happened because I realized at some point that my parents were not, they weren't infallible, and they didn't have everything all figured out, and that how many things they went through, because honestly, like, again, yeah, they were trying to shield us of all these horrible things. And I think what I've tried to now walk this balance of is like, make sure the kids know what's going on, make sure they're aware of it, but in an age appropriate way, which is, we're all trying to figure out what that means. So like, the kids know what's happening in Iran right now. They came with us and to the protest, but we don't get into the details, right? We don't get into like what they do to people and like how they're, so I think that's another part of it that's been interesting for me, is just us building awareness and consciousness, which again resonates a lot with the Gathas for me, being the core message.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dina, we have a request for you to repeat your question. I don't want to type it. I don't want to misrepresent. So if you could please.
Well, you're
kindly
welcome
repeat.
to well, essentially what I said was I would be interested to know how what your experience has been and your children's experience in being Zoroastrians, which is a very small minority religion in a society that probably never heard of the term Zoroastrianism. And I was curious to know what their experience had been.
Thank you, Dina. Go ahead, Farana.
So thank you for that question, because that actually stirs up some emotions in me. Um, can I talk a little bit later?
Yes, of course.
I'm sorry if I caused you distress, Faranak. Forgive me.
No, and I think maybe I'll chime in quickly, and while Farah Jan is composing her feelings, I think, and Nilu wants to comment as well. But I would say that just to echo one thing that I think is really special about Zoroastrians, and again, it was impressive to hear my eldest's point of view of it, is that how aware he was of the consciousness difference. That like he's much more aware of kind of what he's thinking and doing, and versus he talks about how his friends, they're more or less like kind of just doing what they're told to do, right? Or it's kind of like it is a different perspective. And we talked a little bit about what that means and how they're taught at school, right? Like about these different belief systems and like why people chooses this or that. So how prevalent the idea of choice is, I guess, amongst our community stood out. Fine, I can go ahead, please.
So I have to go back to my father's generation. I'm an Iranian Zoroastrian, and on both sides, and I was raised as a Zoroastrian in Iran until I was 15 years old before I moved here. But the horror stories from my father's generation, we heard many times. He was born in Yazd, and he was one of 5 boys in his family. But he was very much discriminated against. So the Zoroastrians in Yazd were separated, definitely segregated. If they went to stores, they could not touch things. They could not touch the food because it would be najis. It would be that they have dirty hands because they're non-Muslim and they're touching other Muslims' food. They had to be very, very low profile, keep their head down. They could not really raise their voice or say anything against other Muslims. So I heard these horror stories. I was not treated that way in Tehran as I was growing up. But think about it. This is only, for my kids, is only 2 generations back. So huge, huge difference. Huge improvement. Thank God. Thank God that people are choosing to become Zoroastrians. They don't carry the trauma from their fathers or grandfathers past. But I feel like it's in me too. It's in my DNA. So I'm a little bit shy. I'm scared of speaking my thoughts and in groups. I'm very calculated on what I say, even though I'm not threatened at all, right? This is a free country, but it's still in me. And I'm speaking from a Iranian-born Zoroastrian, completely raised as Zoroastrian. And I think it carries through generations.
Thank you, Faranak.
I wish I could give you a big hug. I'd give it to you in my mind anyway.
I agree that it carries through generations, Farnak. I mean, I think every Iranian, no matter how long ago their family was Zoroastrian, carries it genetically. And it's not just genetically, but culturally too. You know, the effects of having to suppress our own light, you know, an entire society having to suppress our own light. So,
No, I
Thank
think
you for sharing.
I was going to maybe make one small comment as well. And on that point, I actually think what's really amazing when you think about this is there's a lot of trauma and oppression, obviously, with the Zoroastrian community being a minority over the thousands of years. I think that's true. And I think what's interesting is when you think about it, this is what Zarathustra spoke against, was kind of the fury, the repression, the violence of his day and age in the Bronze Age, and how people might was right, and how much that is still prevalent today, regardless of being a Zoroastrian or not Zoroastrian, and how I think that's so apparent in like kind of the spiritual yearnings of America and other communities all over the world, right? And I think that's what I kind of meant with my son when he was talking about his experiences. Is like his like these ideas resonate with kids naturally, and like, but it's not what they talk about, right? So when he talks about it, he's like, I like that, it's cool. He likes to have those discussions, but like religion for them is like a thing you're told to do, right? Versus like a conversation you're having, and that awakening, I feel, is what so much. I mean, I'm so excited about obviously the American Zoroastrian Society, but like in general, I feel like the world is hungry for this awareness shift, right? And I think all of us recognize trauma and hardship and oppression naturally. I think that's Vohumana speaking to us and saying, hey, there is a disparity between the ideal and the real today, right? And we need to figure that out. And I think someone else in one of our discussions last said this, but they said the discomfort is a signal to us. And I think that really stuck with me. It's like we need to kind of embrace what the discomfort is trying to teach us, like all that pain. And like I wanted to thank Faranak for sharing that so bravely, because that discomfort is talking about it is the beginning of us starting to heal the world and making it a better place. So thank you.
I agree.
I've been joining. So on TikTok, they have these like live discussion groups, like anyone can have them or join them. And I've, for some reason, my algorithm has been feeding me atheist discussion groups. And so I joined one recently and just like started talking about Zoroastrianism. I started by asking, can you, I asked one of the atheists, like, do you believe specifically that God does not exist? Do you believe that it can be proven that God does not exist? And they said, well, atheism technically means lack of belief, but then they asked me, like, does the fact that you can't prove it mean that there is a God? That you can't disprove God, does that mean that there is a God? And I said, no, of course not. That's not logical, right? And so they started to listen to what I was saying a little bit, and I started talking about Zoroastrianism, and they got really interested in the ideas, and they said, well, how do you explain like when kids get bombed or when all these bad things happen in the world? Like, why would God do that if God is good? And I said, well, God isn't doing that. God, the God gave us the choice. We choose whether we do that or not. God is our companion. And if we lean on God and connect with God, we will likely lean towards the right decisions and doing good actions and good thoughts. But if we go away from it, then we're probably more likely to do bad actions. And so to explain, God is not the puppet master. He's a partner in creation, right? We're they're partners in creation. And the the discussion ended like very amicably, and everyone was very interested in the ideas. And it started off like with friction. They're like, like that kind of like atheist friction and resistance that you can get, and it ended up being a very friendly conversation.
Darius, go ahead. Darius, unmute yourself, please.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Hey, yeah, that was a very good comment. You know, I thank everybody for sharing your comments. I think what you were just saying, Kaveh, is fascinating because I think it's a question of definition of how you define God. I think even amongst us in this group, we probably define it a little bit different, each individual. And if you look at, like me personally, if I go into an Abrahamic style discussion forum, I am probably an atheist in that forum because I don't believe in God the way they do. I believe it in the way I see it and how I've been raised culturally and how I've been told to see the world with all those colors and paints that come with it. So I think it's a very, very good point. But it's like with my kids, you know, my daughter, 18, is her mother is Christian. I don't practice. I don't believe in rituals. I believe in happiness and the true teachings of Zarathustra, and that's how I was raised. We did not believe in rituals in our family except the parties and the feasts, which we all loved. But looking at God, I think if people define it the way that it's defined in the Gathas or spoken of in the Gathas, I think fewer and fewer people would be atheists. But in the form of some authority, an old man sitting somewhere throwing rocks at you, I would be definitely an atheist. But thank you for the comment. It was interesting.
And my comment was in response to Naveed. I think that there is this like sense of searching and loss in the world, and like if we're able, with what we're doing here, Naveed, you and I have talked about this, but if we're able to help get that message out with the freedom that we have here in the United States, people will naturally gravitate towards it. And it's not even for the purpose of like converting people to Zoroastrianism or saying we have, you know, like we have more people. It's like, it's not a numbers thing, right? It's just, we don't care if they call themselves Zoroastrian. We're just trying to help bring these ideas back to the world, right?
Darius, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Kaveh, for a really, really informative session. I think Darius just touched on something very interesting that connects also to the childhood experience, of Zoroastrians in the United States, at least for me, is the reflective rather than prescriptive nature of our religion made a lot of my friends far more interested, right? Kids who were raised in a place they were told you have to pray 5 times a day, you can't eat this, you have to do this, were much more sort of non-compliant or anti the religion they were raised in. Whereas with Zoroastrianism, the thought that it's at its core a moral code, um, people were much more curious and interested. And I know for me, that's why it resonated a lot more closely as a, growing curious child.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Zarius. Yeah, I was raised atheist, being told very strictly that God does not exist, and it was hard for me to digest that. And I explored other religions, but this one, that what you're saying, Zarius, is exactly what drew me to Zoroastrianism. Is like it's the ability of my mind to question things is what probably pushed me away from some of the other religions I explored. But in Zoroastrianism, we're taught to advance that ability to question, and I think that's why it's a naturally appealing to religion for thinkers, for people who like to think.
Nilufar, go ahead, please.
I think something that is like really kind of coming to the surface for me thinking about all of this is like, what does it mean for your children who are Zoroastrian in this society, and how they talk about that and what that means. And I think it's kind of like it's kind of like looking at like a seashell. There's so many aspects to the outside, and you know, there's sound that can come from the inside, and like there's a lot that they're constantly in discovery mode. Like that's the beauty of a child. Like for example, if my child has a natural nature to ask a lot of questions and it's been nurtured, and that goes from the ethos of being a Zoroastrian household, my child is such a shining example then of what is trying to be modeled, right? Whether in the classroom, home, at a park, whatever. And then with that being said, like we have a neighbor who we love so much. She's a 76-year-old devout Christian woman, and you know, she loves my children, we love her, we visit her often. So that idea of a neighborly relationship, welcoming her in our home, us being welcomed in her home, again, another Zoroastrian like ethos, right? Like when me and Nevi got married, these were our wedding vows. And to like add on to that, I'm thinking connection with her, like she loves to travel once a year and she puts all her travels in a postcard. And it's really sweet because when I sit with her, my kids, we look at all the animals she sees and she's so engaged and excited. And we talk about, isn't it cool that there was a divine intelligence that did that? And she goes, yeah. And I go, that bridge that my kids are witnessing me make with her is not me trying to be superior to her in philosophy or intelligence. It's me showing that connection is how we come together. It's how we create harmony and love. So whether it's like my neighbor, whether it's my children, whether whoever, like that harmony is how I think is the best example of like when my children go in the world as Zoroastrians or I do, what is the natural nature they are modeling versus kind of anxiously wanting to project to the world.
I think that's great. It's really great.
Thank you.
Darius, go ahead, please.
So actually, this brings up something that my answer, personal answer to Dina's question. The way we bring up our kids, you know, we're a multi-faith household. But I always go back to the teachings of my dad, and my dad always believed calling yourself under a category, right there, you've divided humanity. And basically, if you're born pure with good thoughts, good words, good deeds, no matter what somebody calls themselves, they are a follower of Zarathustra's philosophy. So they don't need to necessarily say, I am this or I am that, because that divides lines. So what we do with our kids, like my oldest daughter, despite, you know, a big influence from my wife's family, which were very open to Christianity, she has chosen, she responds when people say, what are you? She goes, I am simply Iranian. I follow my culture. This is part of my culture. And so she doesn't define herself to separate herself out. And when they say, where does this culture stem from? She goes, oh my God, 4,000 years ago, it was Zarathustra. Don't you know about Zarathustra? And then she explains. And then she goes on, you seem to be a very nice family. You guys seem to be thinking well. You have good thoughts, good words, good deeds. So you are the same as me. And then she leaves it there. But so that's kind of how we have handled it. And my kids have probably created more interest in our culture and our way of life rather than, oh, you are one of those or one of these. No, we're all one and the same. We just believe in the principles of living based on what our culture has taught us from the beginning. So that's kind of what we have done. And it seemed to have worked, but there are many answers to the same question, I guess.
Thank you, Darius. Well, on Kaveh, John, you can probably end the session, but I want to thank you and everybody else. This was so fruitful and so wonderful discussions, and I benefited a lot personally.
To echo what Artemis says, I really love these discussions. I just kind of put out what I'm thinking really so I can get the feedback from you guys, and everything that everyone said like really resonated with me, and I'm sure it resonated with a lot of people here. And it's just I'm just very thankful for the moment to get together and focus on the light and bring light to our world. especially after these past couple of months. So I'd like to say thank you so much to everyone, and I'll talk to the AZF about how we can continue this talk. And I know that there's a lot of other talks, like Naveed has been doing talks. So if you like these, I'm sure you'll like those even more. So yeah, look forward to seeing you guys again, and just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaveh. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaveh. Looking forward to the next one.
Yes.
Thank you, Kaveh.
Counting down to the next one.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.